Welcome to the BCO Midlands virtual tour of 2 Chamberlain Square. My name's Ben Burton, I'm from Overbury, but I'm a regional committee member for the BCO. I will be attempting to chair this event from the comfort of my house. Obviously, due to the current restrictions, I can't physically be on site, which is obviously more frustrating given we are representing the British Council for Offices. Before we get going to the main event, a couple of quick announcements. BCO Awards, hopefully most of you joined virtually on the 19th of October. I'm sure you'll agree, a completely new experience for us all. But for those who couldn't, check out the BCO website section for the winners, and many congratulations to all the finalists, particularly the winners. BCO mentoring program. Scarily, it's been over a year since we launched the mentoring program, which seems to have flown by, but it's been very successful. And as an industry, we're in uncharted territory, and the COVID-19 outbreak is presenting more of a challenge than ever for kind of members, businesses, and the built environment as a whole. Most of the next gen community will have joined after the industry crash in 2008, so won't have experienced anything quite as extraordinary before, but is now more than ever important to make sure we talk to each other, provide support and guidance, or sometimes just listen. The mentoring program is free to next gen members, so I urge you all to get your young professionals to join the BCO. Details will be out shortly regarding next year's program, so please get involved. Future events. Unfortunately, as quickly as we plan events, the government restrictions alter. Therefore, just please bear with us and watch this space, and we'll try to get as many as possible as we can in moving forward. On to today then. Regarding today's format, we have 3 fantastic speakers in the form of Ross Fittall, Senior Development Manager for Argent, Will Ventham, Head of Office Agency for CBRE, and Trevor Ivory, Managing Partner of DLA Piper's Birmingham office. So a little bit about your panel. So Ross is a key member of Argent Birmingham office team. He's delivering the transformational £700 million Paradise development, which is in the cultural and civic centre of Birmingham, the largest mixed-use development outside of London. Prior to this, he managed the final development phase of Brindley Place, which helped to transform Birmingham city centre. He focuses on all the elements in Paradise, including leading design and construction teams, marketing strategy, and plays a pivotal role in the commercial and retail leasing discussions to help attract an eclectic mix of tenants. Ross has both worked as a client and project manager on prominent mixed-use schemes across the country and has a wealth of experience over 18 years. Ross also sits with myself on the BCO Midlands and East Anglia Regional Committee, and is leading the mentoring initiative. He's also passionate about raising awareness for homelessness in young people and regularly works closely with local charity St Basil's. Will is a member of the CBRE National Office team, responsible for office agency and occupier consultancy work. As head of Office Advisory Midlands, he is an active member of the Office Agent Society, the Birmingham Office Market Forum, and has been an advisor to Argent for almost 20 years, having first been involved with the agency back with Brindley Place. He has an envious track record of being involved in some of the highest profile lettings in the city over the past decade, including the likes of Gowlings at Snow Hill, HMRC and HSBC at Arena Central, as well as PwC at Paradise. Lastly, Trevor is the managing partner of global law firm DLA Piper. DLA Piper were the first tenants of 2 Chamberlain Square, taking the top 2 floors of the building. The fit out is due to begin in January, and the firm will then move from its existing offices in Victoria Square House next summer. In his own practice, he specialises in planning law and focuses on complicated urban development projects. His current projects include the recent submitted planning application for the redevelopment of a large part of Digbeth in Birmingham for Oval Properties, and the Consort Place development of 2 new towers next to Canary Wharf for the Far East Consortium. And not to forget, the most important bits to mention is advice to Argent and Birmingham City Council in connection with Paradise. So on to this morning then on how it's going to play out. So Ross is actually on site today, out in the cold, along with his attractive assistant Dan, who's going to be assisting him with some camera work. He will be giving us a tour of the building along with commentary. Will and Trevor will then be presenting from the warmth of their homes to comply with the new COVID restrictions. Following the presentations, we'll move to the questions and answers section. So rather than open up the platform to live questions, please can I ask you use the Q&A function on Zoom, not chat, please. I will then attempt to field these to the panel and summarize any kind of similar questions. Make sure you include your name and company, assuming you want to, that is. So that's enough from me. Over to you, Ross, and fingers crossed technology works.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ben, and good morning, everyone. We're going to try something a little different. Fingers crossed, good weather and working technology. I was going to say so far so good, but actually I don't know if you noticed that my video did drop out when Ben was talking, so I'm really got fingers crossed that it's going to work. So I'm sat in Victoria Square in Birmingham, and the plan, as Ben said, is to show you around the Paradise development today, and primarily to Chamberlain Square, which completed earlier this year. Many of you have perhaps already walked through Paradise and past the buildings, but I know many of you won't have been able to do that yet. So you'll get an opportunity to take a look today, which of course we'd normally do this event, this kind of event in person, but this year is not a normal year by any means. So we're trying a virtual tour. So as Ben mentioned, I'm going to give you a brief update on Paradise. Some background for those of you not familiar with the scheme, because I know we're actually being joined by people from all regions today, not just the Midlands region. And then a snapshot of progress to date. And then we'll take a look inside the building and a brief look of what's to come here at Paradise. So as Ben mentioned, Trevor and Will, myself, are happy to take any questions. So I would encourage you to use that function. Try and make this as interactive as possible. And then please, if you spot a question pop up and you want to interrupt me, then please shout, and also let me know if the technology is failing. So I'm going to try and share my screen now, and I've got a tram in the background, so hopefully that's not too noisy. Okay. So this is the master plan, Paradise master plan, and it shows a three-phase development. The red buildings are the ones that we have just completed. They're the phase 1 buildings with 1 and 2 Chamberlain Square. The blue buildings, phase 2, and phase 3 is the orangey yellow colour, which I'll touch on a bit later. But everything you see on this plan is what we obtained outline planning permission for back in 2012. Everything bar the octagon in the far north, which again I'll touch on shortly. For those of you that know, Paradise is a site that's located right in the heart of Birmingham city centre, joining the traditional city core with the cultural quarter, the tram, as you can hear, running immediately to the south of the site. It's 5 minutes walk from New Street Station and a little bit further walk to Snow Hill and Moore Street. And it had a footfall of nearing on 20 million people a year walking through and around the site in a more normal year, should we say. So a few headlines for you. We're creating over 1.7 million square feet of commercial office space, a 4-star plus hotel, 350 home residential tower across 10 buildings. And we've got the ability to provide up to 500 car parking spaces should we decide to, and a large cycle hub also. So when we started assembling the site in the mid-2000s, I thought it'd be useful to just show a couple of snaps of what it used to look like, demonstrating a few themes really of sort of dark, dingy areas, unsafe and uninviting to walk around as a pedestrian. Certainly not Paradise-esque. And not only an unpleasant environment, but one which acted as a large roundabout, bringing a four-way highway alongside the superb Grade 2 listed town hall behind me. So the original vision was not really about just the buildings or how much you could just fit on the site, but also primarily about improving connectivity across the city and prioritising the pedestrian again, following the car is king principles of the 60s and 70s. It's worth remembering that the Paradise master plan was being formed with the backdrop of the Birmingham's big city plan and the vision for movement, which was incredibly forward thinking actually, in setting out the transformation of Birmingham across key sites, but all with connectivity as a central theme. So these Glenn Howells sketches, which I dug out from about 2007, I think, show this view through to the clock tower, which was blocked by the library. And in the other direction, the Hall of Memory, something that hadn't been seen for probably about 40 years. And these were key parts of forming. Which brings us to a remodeled Chamberlain Square. And that point about creating a fantastic collection of historical buildings this part of Birmingham has to offer. As you can see, another one behind me there. And what you start to see are the new connections off the square in this image, really showing the initial vision for the space, sort of wide, good quality public realm. And so this is the view that many of you will have seen just prior to work commencing in 2015 of Chamberlain Square. And in the centre of the picture there, you can just pick out the entrance to Paradise Forum. Through the double doors, the majority of that 1 million plus pedestrians a month walked, which is shocking wayfinding for a city like Birmingham. And then we get to the familiar CGI of phase one. Which brings us to today, and a reality, if I just sort of turn around here, and I can't really see the screen thanks to the sun in my eyes, but hopefully what you can see behind me is a pretty close match to that early CGI. And here you really start to appreciate the superb collection of buildings that I mentioned: the town hall, the council house, the museum and art gallery, and a new space for Birmingham to use and be proud of. As I take a walk into the square, you start to see Congreve Street behind me, which is like a wide street now. Bear with me 1 second. It's also a bit colder than I was expecting, so my hands are pretty cold. So this is what Congreve Street used to look like. You know, there's actually an image before this, which I've jumped, which excuse me, sorry. Yeah, so effectively this was, and as you can see on that sign on the top right hand side there, it was a passage and a brick wall effectively when you got to the end. The alternative route being a dark and dingy subway, when historically it was a proper street, given that facade of the museum, which is just behind me, if you can see my camera at the same time, a bit of space to breathe. And then this was the view looking at the library, albeit from the other direction. And now, this is the view that you get instead. So you start to see that Hall of Memory behind me, from the sketch that I showed. And I'm now going to walk up these steps over here to where our first retail tenant, Dishoom, is located. You can see, sorry if I'm jumping the screen around a little bit. So I'm now stood on the Dishoom terrace, and you can see the view that they have, hopefully if it's not too bright. I mean, another point of the master plan here, which is worth talking about, I think I'll face this way so I'm out of the sun a bit, was the ground floor uses. And the key focus for us is to get that right mix of tenants to add something different and complement each other. I mean, unfortunately for Dishoom, they opened their doors a week before the first lockdown in March, and now I've had to close them again. But when they reopened in August, it demonstrated how a really good quality operator and offer will succeed even in tough trading circumstances. Along Centenary Way behind me, there's more retail units, which will spill out with external speaking into this space and activating it. So I'm going to take a walk into the square now and make my way through the Harris fencing, which still surrounds the square, but will be coming down very soon. And you start to see how the public realm is designed to encourage people to sit and dwell, compared to that very transient space that existed before from that image that I brought up back in 2015. Excuse me, a bit jerky. And the public realm before, alongside the ground floor uses is what is key to make Paradise a really unique place. We learned a lot about the important lessons at Brindley Place and more recently at King's Cross. And Paradise uses the same streets and squares principles to be the nucleus of the design. This is what everyone will interact with. The buildings that sit alongside these spaces just must complement this element. I mean, I think, as you can see from me walking around here, the spaces are impressive visually, but it's the people that give it its buzz and create a sense of community. I mean, even in August when Dishoom were open, just that one unit made such a difference to the spaces, just brought it alive. And it was fantastic to see, really, see real people using it. I mean, I'm biased, of course, but I think it's really, really impressive space.
Ross?
Ross, yeah.
There's one question come in, and I promise it's not from me, because most people will think this is the kind of question I would ask. But we've been asked a question by Camille Gill on any word on when Vinoteca will open, just while you're talking about the retail units.
Yeah, sure. So Vinoteca are looking to fit out in January. Now, they'll probably have a 3 to 4 month fit out, because they're actually putting a mezzanine space in, and I'll show you that space in a second. They, of course, they were due to start fitting out earlier this year, but they've been monitoring the situation. I mean, they're another really exciting tenant for us, and it's another sort of new offer for Birmingham, because it's their first unit outside of London. So, of course, from their management point of view, it's a bit tricky to go to a new location when they haven't got the management or the staff recruited yet locally. So, but they are still thinking about that. They're obviously thinking long term anyway. So I think next summer will be a really sort of spring, summertime will be a key thing. I mean, it's worth just saying whilst I'm sat here, there's 5 retail units in the ground floor at 2 Chamberlain Square, and a few other more in 1 Chamberlain Square. And despite everything that's going on, we have actually got really good interest. And I think it comes back to that point I was saying about Dishoom. The good quality operators and the good offers can still succeed, obviously in the right circumstances. And at the moment, especially today, that's not. But I think looking forward to next year, having a space like this and having people sort of use it, they'll do really well. And we've actually hoping to do a couple of deals on that and announce that before Christmas. So that's good. But yeah, Vinoteca should be there next summer. And actually, if you look down here behind me, they will have some external seating area spilling out onto the square. You'll be able to sit here, have a coffee, have a glass of wine, in a pretty impressive backdrop.
Cool. Thank you.
What I was going to mention was below me is a 2-level car park with 300 car parking spaces. So all this space here is vehicle free. So when you go back to that image of the town hall and those cars sort of going alongside it, you know, that you won't get any of that here. It's purely pedestrian, cycle, you know, things like that. So I think similar to Brindley Place in King's Cross, Paradise is a managed estate 24/7. So that then ensures that it remains clean and safe and well maintained. That's an incredibly important feature for us and our tenants. So behind me, if I just speed up a bit, behind me is One Chamberlain Square. That's fully let to PwC, as most people know, and they actually moved in December last year. This is an Eric Parry design building, 172,000 square feet across the 8 stories. But I think what it's done is it's set the bar for the quality of the architecture and the materials used, and we're really pleased with the end result. Hopefully, if you haven't seen it in person, you can get a bit of a flavour for it, for what you can see at the moment. Just notice I am squinting quite a lot, so apologies. And then there's a bit of a lag. So when you take a look inside, this is inside of the shoe, and this is inside of PwC's offices. You can see the outlook that they've got. Having both of these as our first tenants for the development was brilliant, as they're really sort of forward thinking, and the fit outs are fantastic. So people can sort of learn a lot from that. So then to 2 Chamberlain Square, which you'll not have failed to notice the huge, tall, precast concrete columns behind me. Something which the entire team, and particularly BAM, Arabs, Techrete, worked incredibly hard to achieve the concept, and hats off, they did it. 2CS is a Glenn Howells design building. They're first on the development, in addition to their role as the masterplan architect. They've gone on to design a few more buildings for us since. It's 183,000 square feet across 8 stories. I just got to make sure I don't fall down these steps. A typical floor plate of 24,000 square foot, based around a central square at core even. But the building really addresses Chamberlain Square, and you describe those columns, or Dav probably would, from DHA, as a modern interpretation of the town hall, complementing the historical buildings surrounding it. So with the floor to ceiling glazing, the building benefits from views into what will be Paradise's 3 public squares when all completed. As we walk across the square, it's probably worth just taking a look behind me at the memorial. You can see that, probably not in the best position. We've been recently cleaning it and almost finished refurbishing it. So it will be working and lit in a matter of weeks, but it really acts as a centerpiece to the square now. And as I'm walking over to the reception of the building, you can just get a sneaky peek of Thomas Atwood, the statue that we've relocated back onto the steps recently, enjoying the view. So then we walk into the building, and just before we do, we sort of take a look back at the buildings surrounding the square, and also these impressive colonnade. You can see, actually, it's worth just, as we are here, you can see the levels have hopefully you can see the levels. You can see the levels, how they change as we walk around the site. And what that's done is that when we walk into the reception, it means this space is triple height. And there's a real civic feel to it, appropriate for its location, really. And then to my right, you can just see here, we've got doors that open into what will be the Vinoteca unit. So, as I mentioned, they'll open next year. Just open that door. You get a sneak view into that space. I'm not going to go in there because there's a big drop, so we haven't put the floor in yet. But you can see the space that they'll sort of look out onto, which is going to be, again, fantastic. So whilst One Chamberlain Square was fully let to PwC, both buildings were committed to speculatively. So that's 350,000 square feet, and 2CS was always seen as a multi-let building. So we've obviously let 6th and 7th floors to DLA Piper, as we know, but we now also have Knights and Mazars fitting out on 2 other floors. So come the spring, this space will be a hub of activity, and the idea is that people really use the space as a touchdown space, as a place to sort of meet clients, utilize Vinoteca next door. Within the building, there's cycle and shower facilities, and I have got a couple of images of that on a slide in a second. It's a BREEAM Excellent building. It's an EPC rating of B. As part of the wider development and being delivered through One Centenary Way, we're providing another 300 plus space cycle hub, which is open to all on a membership scheme. And that'll be the first of its kind in the city, and really support the facilities that are being provided in 2 Chamberlain Square. As we move through reception, you'll see the manned reception desk and the view that you get out of the square as you leave every day. We've got security turnstiles here, and automatically call your lift directly to your floor, which then takes us to the floor plate. And Will, you can take over now, and everyone else can have a break from my voice.
Thank you, Ross. I had hoped to be there on site myself, but I'm relying on my able assistant, Dan Moorcroft from Argent. For those of you old enough, this is going to be a little bit like Challenge Annika, I expect. So what we've seen here is Dan has come through that sort of impressively manned reception. He's now come out of one of 6 high-speed 24-person passenger lifts which service the core. It's worth saying that this 6th floor space is just shy of 20,000 square feet. You're frozen there, Dan.
Well, you just have to guess where he is now.
Carry on. Dan was making his way out of one of 4 entrances into the floor plate. So, as I say, this is a 19,000, just shy of 20,000 square foot floor plate on the 6th floor. Typical floor plates going down the building are just over 24,000 square feet. But obviously we can subdivide up to quarters for future proofing in terms of occupier flexibility. Dan's come out onto the Centenary Way elevation. So you've got the PwC building across the way. This is the northern elevation of the building. As you can see, the floors are wrapped entirely by way of floor to ceiling height glazing. We've got a new 150mm fully accessible raised floor. You can't quite tell from the images here, but we've got an educated LED lighting system. That's complete with automatic daylight compensation and presence detection control, for example. And again, we've gone slightly over in terms of the floor to ceiling height at 2.75 meters, which gives that sort of better interpretation of the floor space. In terms of the common areas, we've got male, female and disabled WCs on each floor. Ross has previously mentioned the additional wellbeing facilities in terms of the cycle facilities, changing facilities, shower facilities, etc. within the basement, and the potential for the hub. We're now at the west elevation of the 6th floor, and you can see the progress we're making in regards to One Centenary Way, and obviously the views across to Centenary Square. Dan's now walking towards the southern elevation. This forms part of phase 2 of Paradise, where we've obviously got the consent for the hotel, One Centenary Way, which you've just seen, and then the potential for a 3rd office building. But importantly, what's also going to be included within this space in phase 2 is further public realm through the introduction of Ratcliffe House. So more space upon which the community of Paradise and the estate can see activity and footfall throughout the estate. As we look along this side, you can see there's some works underway. That is one of the predetermined soft spots within the floor plate. We're very conscious of the emergence and trend towards vertical integration, virtual connectivity amongst the floor plates. As I say, we are fortunate to have 6 24-person passenger lifts throughout the building. We've also got 2 fire escapes servicing all floors, but also we were conscious of the connectivity of space between floor plates for employees, and making that sort of transition between floors as pleasant as possible when occupiers wish to integrate that within their floor plates. So to Dan's right hand side, we've got, as I say, phase 2, but the direction he's walking in at the moment towards the front of the building, as we call it, is overlooking Chamberlain Square. And on this particular floor, the 6th floor, we have a 3,200 square foot dedicated terrace space, which I'm sure Trevor will be pleased to see in all its glory as a dedicated facility to DLA. We thought it was important to introduce, and the trend for introducing outside space, again with ESG agendas, well-being agendas, that outside space upon which to work offers a different dynamic. We're obviously very fortunate within Paradise as the overall community and the overall estate to have that flexibility at ground floor level and public realm within ground floor level as well. So the wider estate is a full benefit to obviously the all occupiers within the estate. The terrace is 3,200 square feet, and as you can say, it will give DLA some great vistas across the city, and obviously that engagement with the sort of civic centre and the cultural buildings surrounding Chamberlain Square. I think at that point, I'll hand back to you, Ross.
Thanks, Will, and thanks, Dan. Well done. So before I pass over to Trevor briefly, I'm just going to whiz through what's next at Paradise, as there's an incredible amount going on at the moment, and the team here are working flat out. So bear with me 1 second. So actually, whilst I've got this up, these are the images of the bathrooms, the WCs in the building that Will was sort of talking about. And also the shower and cycle facilities in the basement. And then that's the car park, which is sat underneath, that I referred to, about 300 spaces. And that's just a summary of the timeline of phase 1. So on to phase 2, and we've now started, and you just saw a glimpse above of One Centenary Way. This is the largest building on the development. It's an exoskeleton building. It's a steel building, so a completely different kind of architectural style again, and it's also a Glenn Howells building. We've recently finished, which I'm sure some people have seen on social media, the installation of 16 mega trusses that span the A38 tunnel, partly due to the limited space that there is to land some foundations in this plot. And this is a truly impressive feat, really, as each one took 3 days to transport from Scotland, largest being 35 meters in length, and I forget the exact figure of how heavy they are. Dan might be able to jump in actually, but certainly close on 100 tons. This is just an image of those being lifted into place and how the architecture sort of comes inside the building. The Octagon is something we're really excited about as we introduce a residential element to the scheme, which wasn't part of that outline planning application that I mentioned earlier. So this is providing 346 homes, and at 49 stories high, I'm reliably told it will be the world's tallest pure octagonal building. But please don't Google that. It's quite a striking building when you start to look at the images here from outside and in. We've recently submitted the planning application for this, so hope to get conclusion on that around Christmas time. Also, 3 Chamberlain Square, we've just concluded a design competition to select an architect for 3 Chamberlain Square. Will be announcing the selected practice in the next week or so. This sits directly adjacent to the building that I'm in at the moment, and also alongside the town hall. So it's a really sort of prime site for us here. And what we're going to do with this building, it will really set the sustainability agenda for Paradise going forward. And timing wise, we look to submit a planning application around summertime next year. Providing a new hotel is something that we've always thought will complement the other uses on the estate. We maintain that long-term view, even with the hospitality sector going through a difficult time at present. And this slide just summarises the timing of what we've gone through. So really, we're at the phase at the moment where the phase 1 buildings are completed and they're letting up really, really well. And we're now sort of beginning the design journey again for numerous buildings at the same time. So there's got an awful lot going on over the course of the next few years. And finally, phase 3. So we're actually starting to look at phase 3 as well, with design on phase 1 taking around 5 years before a spade hit the ground. The projects are long term, and we're shaping our thoughts based on how the city is changing, how occupiers are changing the way that they use space, and the buildings will sort of form will reflect that. Phase 3 is actually the largest phase of the scheme, and it has a large green square in the middle of it, similar in scale to the central square at Bridley Place. Again, all of this is sitting over the A38 tunnel, so adding some constraints there. So enough from me, I think, for now. Before Ben sort of looks through any questions that may have appeared, I thought I'd just ask Trevor if he could say a few words about his experiences with DLA over the last 9 months or so, and amidst the beginning of an office move, and how your approach, Trevor, may have shifted slightly, and where 2 Chamberlain Square sort of fits into all of that, if you don't mind.
Sure, of course, Ross. So I think it's been an interesting year in terms of trying to move an office, and I'm probably one of a rare breed of people who signed a lease for 40,000 square feet of new office space during the course of lockdown, which may appear to be a slightly odd decision, but I think the factors before lockdown and before COVID, the factors in terms of our thinking about wanting a move to new premises in Birmingham were varied, I suppose. And critical to us is our positioning. We are the only global law firm that has a presence in Birmingham, and we wanted to make sure that we had an office that had the right prestige and had the right appearance to reinforce that global brand that DLA Piper has. That's critical to us, both in terms of positioning in the market, in terms of the face we present to our clients, but it's also really critical in terms of our staff. We have to attract the right talent. We pride ourselves on attracting and retaining the best lawyers in all of our in all of our geographic locations. And a big part of that recruitment is the quality of the working environment. It's the quality of the building, and critically the space around it, and how that feels. So there were a number of factors that led to our decision to move. I think having made that decision, Paradise very quickly became the obvious location for us, because it is the best location in Birmingham. I can probably say that, you can't, Ross, but that was very much our view as a business. We've seen today a glimpse of the fantastic quality of the environment that surrounds Paradise, the historic buildings, and that great space that Chamberlain Square has become. And I think that public realm for me is a really important part of it, because this development is going to become a key destination in Birmingham. It is going to be the place that people come after work to have a drink in the summer. There aren't many outdoor seating areas in the city centre of Birmingham where you can go and get a drink or get a coffee or lunch. It can happen here at Paradise, and so it will have that buzz, I think, that you were talking about. And also, obviously, the space. We've just seen the terrace. I'm very proud of my terrace, and we have great plans for how we're going to use that as part of that that well-being. And important to us is that terrace is available to our staff as well as our clients, and is part of their working space. So that's been critical to us. Lockdown, coronavirus, and everything that's happened this year, obviously, lots has changed. And I think for us, we've done a lot of soul searching during the course of the last 9 or 10 months about what that means for offices. I think for me, though, what's very clear, and for us as a business, what's absolutely clear is that the idea that the office is dead, for us, is just not a view that we can relate to at all. The office, it's the place where we come together and meet our clients. It's the place where we come together and collaborate most effectively with each other. And there are lots of benefits which simply can't be replicated anywhere else. So that there's no doubt in our mind that we and others will continue to need office spaces moving forward. I think the one thing that has underlined that for us, and through COVID, is actually we've been very conscious of the potential impact on the mental health of our staff and their general well-being of working at home. For some people, that makes them quite isolated. If they're single person living in a flat without access to outdoor space, they've found the experience of lockdown really quite challenging in many ways. Likewise, if you're a large family struggling, competing for space, actually not having your own working environment is also quite stressful. So we've certainly seen through the wellbeing surveys we've done with our staff, we've seen very clearly that actually working from home may have felt great for the first couple of weeks, but it very quickly became clear that it was having some quite serious impacts on the well-being of our staff. So that's become another reason, really. So in many ways, we come out of lockdown with an extra reason for needing offices, rather than asking ourselves a question of why we need an office at all. The big change, I suppose, for us is in terms of design. We were fortunate. We were right on the verge. Literally the Friday before first lockdown, I spent the day interviewing fit-out contractors. And then on the Monday, Boris announced that lockdown. And I think that timing at the time was incredibly frustrating, because we were ready to go and should by now be in the building. Actually, it worked very well for us, in that what it has allowed us to do is to pause that design process and just reflect on what the impact of lockdown and will be in terms of how we use the space. And I do think that's where the more fundamental changes are, is in terms of how we use that space. And certainly the design we're now moving forward with has much less emphasis on individual desks, much more emphasis on different types of working environment, activity-based working, collaboration spaces, quiet spaces, and everything in between. And the tech, Zoom, Teams, and all the other options are going to be part of our working environment moving forward, and we need to make sure that all of our meeting rooms, all of our breakout spaces have that ability to use tech. So I think that those lessons are what we feel we've learned from lockdown, and are what we're trying to bring forward in a revised design from that which we had before the first lockdown.
That's great. Well, thank you, Trevor. it's great to hear kind of an occupier's perspective on how COVID has changed the world. But and hopefully everyone's enjoyed the tour from Ross. We are going to club together later to buy him some better earphones. So apologies if it was a bit crackly at times. Thank you for Will for kind of bearing with Dan and the slight glitch on working out where he was in the building. So over to the sort of Q&A really now, I suppose is the easiest part. I think the first one is from a question from the regional chair of the BCO, Danny Palmer, which probably goes to you, Ross, I just said. As commercial and residential buildings in the city centre are getting taller, did the option ever get considered for 2 Chamberlain Square to go any higher?
Thanks, Ben. Well, I think the Paradise master plan is, as we've been looking at, set amongst some of the most impressive listed buildings in Birmingham city centre. So there are quite stringent conditions from a planning perspective to make sure that it's sympathetic to its surroundings. So I think that the massing and the scale of the buildings in Paradise, particularly on that eastern edge adjacent to those historical buildings, is quite set out actually. And one of the primary reasons that the terrace on both buildings, both 2 Chamberlain and 1 Chamberlain Square, because PwC have a similar terrace at 6th floor level. One of the reasons that is there, not only does it provide a great amenity for the staff and visitors, but it steps away from those historical listed buildings. So it's sort of giving them space to breathe a little bit. Another reason for that concrete street to be sort of widened again. I think the other factor. Can you still hear me at the moment, actually? Because I just got a beep in my ear.
Yeah, still here. You're still crackly.
Still crackly. Okay, great. The other factor, I think, is just pure scale and size of regional buildings. I think that the most important thing for us was to get the floor plates to be of the size that suit those larger occupiers, and not just larger occupiers. People don't necessarily want to be spread over multiple floors. You saw the soft spot with Trevor's floor, where you can interconnect the floors, and you can sort of create that well-being point of interlinking, using the stairs between them. I think what those large floor plates also mean is that they can be divided up into good size suites for smaller occupiers. But in the regions, I think there's a limit at a certain time of supplying the market. You wouldn't be able to do a 24,000 square foot floor plate and put that over 20 stories, because if you look at the take up in the city on an annual basis, you'd be sort of providing 5-10 years worth of supply in one hit, and that's just not really a viable option. I don't know, Will, if you want to add anything to that. But...
Yeah, the only thing I'll comment, you have to put it into the context of this being phase 1 and you committing as a developer and a client to 2 buildings next door to one another. It can sometimes get distracted by 2 Chamberlain Square in isolation, but you have to recall that obviously we were committing to 1 Chamberlain Square as well. And as a collective, that's in excess of 300,000 square feet. I'd like to think the letting activity across both buildings, in the region of 70+% in terms of lettings, is testament to the sort of scale and quantum of product we've delivered there, really. But I'd support what Ross says, in the sense of the size of floor plate was critical to a regional centre in terms of delivering large-scale pre-lets, which is what we see across the board, across all regional centres which we're involved with. So it was getting that right rather than height necessarily from a Paradise perspective.
Many thanks both. As expected, there are a few COVID linked questions, which probably gives you, all three of you, kind of opportunity to answer it from a kind of, whether it's the kind of developer, occupier, or letting perspective. So thank you to Graham Johnson, Alan West, and Danny Palmer again. So I'll kind of link them all together, really. So partly it's to do with any kind of changes to the kind of design construction that are kind of are happening going forward from a kind of occupier perspective. And then to do with the kind of fit out of design, so the kind of tangible outcomes on kind of changes in occupancy density, any kind of reviews of any kind of landlord, HVAC systems, ventilation rates. So it's probably easier to kind of, for you all to just have a quick kind of few minutes each on kind of how COVID has impacted and made changes to what we used to do.
Yeah, shall I kick off? I think it's really important to stress, the long-term nature of the developments. There's no doubt that COVID will have an impact, in everybody's heads on how they sort of conduct business. I think the major shift on that is obviously the balance of agile working and that mix between working from home and going to the office. But I absolutely agree with what Trevor was saying before about how there is still a role for the office. I would say that, wouldn't I? But I think that's, fundamentally important because of the well-being point, the development of staff, which is a really, really key point. Certainly sort of staff just starting out in their careers who are sort of missing out on those ad hoc conversations, walking to meetings, things like that. So I think from a design and construction point of view, 3 Chamberlain Square, as I mentioned earlier, is right at the beginning of its design journey. So actually will be one of the first sort of post-COVID buildings to be delivered. So we will no doubt be debating that point over the next few months. But I think a lot of it will be technology driven, and I think it'll also be down to the fit outs. Again, Trevor mentioned about collaborative spaces. I think the office will be somewhere that people come and collaborate and have certain types of meetings and interactions that you just can't get over Zoom or Teams. And I think everyone was quite, it was novel for a month or a couple of months. If you've got small children running around, it's not particularly novel, to be honest, at all, at any time. But I've certainly got Teams fatigue now, and I've been enjoying going back into the office and having design workshops that, to get that creative element. So I think it's the spaces in the office that sort of provide that ability to have those kinds of interactions that are really important. But I was going to just touch on digital elements because I think it's about how buildings utilize technology, which has been starting to happen anyway with sort of smart buildings and things. But and 2 Chamberlain Square does this already as well. So it almost provides that contactless journey up to your office space. So you're not touching lots of surfaces, the large lifts. You can come in here and you can walk in from the square without touching a door. You can swipe a card on your security turnstile. It automatically brings the lift down to a predestined floor. You get out the floor at the other end and you walk in through the door at your office, and you haven't actually touched anything. So that's sort of one thing where technology will play a part in it. But I do think things like, as buildings progress, and they need to get this way anyway because of the sustainability agenda and net zero elements coming in, you're going to see more and more things like natural ventilation coming back into buildings and city centres with the air quality improving. So I think ventilation, I do agree that from an HVAC point of view, circulation of air, natural ventilation, I think a lot of that will also play a part in it.
I think from my perspective, if I try and answer next, I think in terms of what COVID's done to our design plans as an occupier of the building, I think firstly it's probably worth saying as a firm we are quite generous in terms of our space. So in terms of densities, we occupy buildings at quite low densities to start with, somewhere around sort of between 10-15 square meters per head of space. So I think we haven't had the challenge that some other occupiers would have of actually maintaining social distancing. We've got that ability built into the amount of space we've already taken. But I think the big change for us is really thinking about how our staff and our clients are going to use that space. As Ross says, we're not going to see people being in the office 5 days a week again. That has clearly gone. And so it's led us to start to think about, well, what is it that people are going to be coming into the office for? And we've done a lot of surveying, a lot of engaging with staff on that point. And I think ultimately, a lot of that is about some of those things that Ross has already mentioned, that kind of coming in to learn, to develop, to engage, to collaborate, coming in to be with your colleagues in one form or another. So the big change for us is very much design and looking at having a greater variety of workspaces so that people can move around the office. They can use the office as efficiently and effectively as possible for whatever the task is that they're coming in to do. And recognizing that if you're not in 5 days a week, you don't necessarily need to have your own desk in the sort of traditional way that lawyers probably are one of the last professions to still be clinging on to that as a principle. But it feels as if it's becoming less relevant if we're seeing our desk as being wherever we put our laptop down, which I think is what the last few months have done for us. I think the other big factor, which is probably quite legal specific, we're lawyers, we like our paper, and we have lots of it traditionally. And I think a number of firms have tried, and we're always trying to move towards being paperless. And quite often that's met with resistance. Actually, one thing that's come out of lockdown is we've all had to get used to it because we simply haven't had access to our files when we've been working from home. So I think one of the opportunities for us in the new building is to really look at how we take that reduced reliance on paper back into the office with us and don't go back to the old habit of paying prime rents for prestigious locations like 2CS and then filling it with filing cabinets and paper, which feels like a not terribly sensible use of money.
Thanks. Will, do you want to add to that?
I think from an agency perspective, it's been very clear. And although, in the context of property, the last 9 months isn't a significant amount of time, it's been very clear that the COVID period we've been going through has, if anything, just been a continuation, an enhancement of trends we were already seeing emerging prior to COVID. If anything, COVID in the lockdown period has allowed occupiers to reconsider their workplace. It's almost acting as an accelerator to themes we were already seeing coming through well in advance of any pandemic. So in some respects, it's just moved those along somewhat. I mean, it's well documented in various articles. You can look at Google or any search engine and it's the death of the office. I don't stand by that whatsoever. If anything, I would challenge that and say, this is the birth of a better office going forward. Very much so. And that's reflected as well, just from a localized marketplace. If you look at take up over the course of this calendar year, the flight to quality has been quite apparent. I mean, we've transacted the floors in One Chamberlain Square at headline rents, for the city through the course of the lockdown period. And if you look into last year, we had a record year of grade A take-up at just over 70% of overall take-up was grade A. And that flight to quality is a true reflection of occupiers now realizing that their space needs to be employee or customer focused. I mean, many moons ago, we used to do inspections with a managing partner and a finance director, and they would form an opinion on where a business ought to be. It is very much now decision by committee. You have, finance directors, managing partners, HR representation, young business leader representation in decision making. I think that is a demonstration of why, as an industry, we were very much on the front foot around a lot of the challenges and a lot of the themes which are being accelerated now through COVID anyway. So I think we're very well placed as an industry, as I say, within this office sector to sort of catalyse upon that, really, in some respects. So.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you all. Just kind of mindful of time, really. We're now at 1 hour. There's a few people dropping out, so I imagine they're on to their next Death by Teams or Zooms calls. So it's 11 o'clock. So I'll just take one more question. It's come from Howard Morgan. So it's probably for you, Ross. Just something about Paradise and how it's being managed and what services and amenities will be available to occupiers and their staff. Obviously, you've already referred to the fact that next summer we'll be able to sit outside and drink wine. Is there any other kind of gyms, cycle storage, those kind of things, which I assume is where the question's aimed?
Yeah, thanks. So as I mentioned, it's a 24-hour managed estate. So we've been employing a management team, an estate team, for over 12 months now. So before the buildings were completed, and that was really to start building up that highly managed a feature. And I think, building on what I said at Brindley Place, hopefully people notice that when you walk off of Broad Street and cross that bridge over the canal, you walk into an area that feels different and feels cleaner and safer almost immediately, but you haven't got security sort of breathing down your neck. So that's sort of one part of what Paradise will do, and that's already happening. And hopefully, if you walk through, you'll see people cleaning and tidying and jet washing, and it's just about keeping those public spaces well maintained and really good. I think the other element to bear in mind is, I mentioned the cycle hub that's coming in the first building in phase 2. There's over 300 spaces in that. That's open to anyone on a sort of membership scheme. So we're thinking about having mechanics and visiting mechanics, and you've got your ability to have your showers and things there. So that's a real great thing for the development. The ground floor, as I mentioned, in phase 1, it's largely F&B related. But what we are looking at in the other phases is sort of introducing more of that leisure use. We're looking at a gym inside the BTR building, which will be open to all. And also in the phase 3 development, I mentioned we've got planning for sort of up to 500 car parking spaces. With the trends in the city, we may not build out all of those. And then we've got an ability to potentially use that basement space for other sort of commercial uses. So absolutely, things like your cinemas and your leisure things. We want this to be a development that is 24 hours, 7 days a week, and is real sort of vibrant. So we're always looking to see how we can use those spaces for the wider public, really, not just the occupiers in the buildings.
Great.
I just think on that, Ben, if you don't follow, as an adopted Brummie over the last 20 years, I think we've got a huge, and apologies for those people who are outside the Midlands on this call, but we've got a huge opportunity around the Commonwealth Games in a couple of years' time to open up Birmingham to a completely different audience to what we're already used to from a business sense. This is going to open up on a tourism scale, and to have facilities and environments like Paradise up and running, operational, working, well managed, is a huge testament to Birmingham as a city in terms of what we're going to be able to offer and how that's going to be reflected at those, as I say, to a global audience at the Games. So it's a real opportunity for us as a city to latch on to the good work we're doing here at Paradise to the Argent guys and use that as a really good model of demonstrating what a great city we're all part of. So.
No, well, very good. I'm glad you interjected, because I couldn't have said it better myself. Very good. Fully mindful of time now, so I'm going to have to wrap it up. Normally at this point in a live debate, we'd ask for a kind of gratuitous round of applause. So I assume people in the background are sat at home clapping away. But I'd just like to thank Ross, Trevor and Will and Dan in the background, obviously, for his camera work. I think it went as well as could have done, apart from Ross's poor earphones. But thank you all for joining us. But yeah, thank you all for joining us, and yeah, watch this space regarding any future BCO events, and keep safe. Thank you all.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.
Cheers.